Hello, friends. That countdown makes me laugh every time. Seems like some big, serious, fancy thing is about to happen, like a bomb is going to go off or something intense. Well, hello, two people. How's it going? Good to see you guys. We missed a week last week because I had COVID. I didn't even bother to try to look very pretty today. So, you'll have to deal with my frump. But I think we're all going to be okay. Hello. Missed a week last week, and then we moved our time today. So we're just throwing you guys off left and right, just keeping you on your toes, keeping you on the edge of your seat. Happy to have you here. We've had like 20 to 30 people per week, and we're like a nice tidy 6 right now. And I like it. It's intimate, it's real, it's small. It's going to be great. 7, there's 7 of you. I can't believe it. Hello. Please feel free to say hi in the chat. Excuse my coughing. I'm still coming out of the COVID cough situation. Doing a lot better. Feeling so much better. Thank you for asking, Sonia. Feeling so much better. Yeah, I'm pretty much back to normal energy-wise. It's just this cough is a little persistent. Although, to be honest, I had this cough before I got COVID, and I don't think it was COVID related. It's a whole other dietary thing where I'm just old and need to eat differently. Hooray for aging. All right, so let's dive into today's topic. It's good to see you all. Good to have you here. I'm like trying to make the hair less terrible. I'm going to move on. So I wanted to talk today. I'm, deeply engaged with this human design process, and I'm sure many of you here are familiar with the system of human design. I've had a long-standing, I want to say, dynamic relationships / large amount of resistance to, hello, Mariana, good to see you. Thank you so much, Deirdre. I appreciate it. I'm happy to feel better too. My God, it was rough. People keep saying like, it's just like a cold. It's like no big deal. That was not the case for me. It was like a very, 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 very bad cold that at times made me feel like I couldn't breathe and was going to die. So Richard Horseman, what? Good to see you, motherfucker. This is the place where we say motherfucker and we talk to God all at one time. Why? Because there is no separation. All is one. One is all. And wherever we create separation is where we're creating judgment. And when we create judgment, we can't have a whole, healthy, holistic relationship with ourselves. You know how in the self-help world, they're always telling you to love yourself more? And part of you goes like, if I could love myself, I already would have done that. I don't know how to love myself. Anybody relate to that? Like, or you kind of know how to love yourself, sort of ish, but like secretly you're like, am I the only weirdo on the planet who doesn't know how to fully love all parts of self? You're not, is the answer. And the reason is nobody teaches us that what self-love actually means. I'm on a tangent now, but I'm enjoying it. So I'm going to stay on it for a minute and then we're going to come back to the topic. But watch how magically it's going to weave itself together. I don't know how yet, but it's going to come together. So how do we actually find full self-love? It has to do with creating no separation internally. When you're a child and you're the kind of child who likes to curse, I'm making that up, and your mom is the kind of child who believes, I don't know, very rigid religious rules and thinks cursing is bad. She says to you, don't curse, the neighbors are listening. And then a part of you that likes to curse, for example, becomes separate from the rest of you. You kind of quarantine her off, pun intended, topical reference included. You're welcome. That was for free. You quarantine the cursing part of yourself off over in a corner. You exile her, okay, over here in the side of your psyche. And then here you are being a good girl right here because mom approves of good girls. So you get the love of mom, which when you're a child is your only source of love is mom and dad. That's God. That's the church. That's society. That's parents. That's your inner self. It's everything, mom and dad. So when they judge the part of you that curses, for example, you have to exile her so you could be good girl and get that love. Now, some people's relationship to exiling a part is they go, well, I exiled that part here at home, but fuck you guys when I'm with my friends. I'm going to bring her back and she's going to have a voice when I'm with my friends. But back when I'm at home, I'm going to exile her again and she's going to live over here. And then you get this really complicated relationship where you start to believe like, One of these is right and one of these is wrong. Which reality is right? And which reality is good? And which reality is wrong? And which reality is bad? Is my mom's reality right, good? Or is my mom's reality wrong, bad? Is my friend reality where I get to say fuck as much as I want right, good? Or is it wrong, bad? And the answer is no and yes. The answer is you were always whole and perfect and complete as you were, cussing part and non-cussing part. But mom had an issue and mom made a judgment, and that judgment created a separation internally. So what is healing? On the healing path, what we're trying to do is become whole again. We're trying to love ourselves. Self-love, as we were just talking about, what does it mean? It means you feel whole and no parts of you are exiled away and made bad, made to hide under rocks so that nobody would see them, God forbid. It's about integrating all the parts of self that got judged into exile when you were young. So you might say to yourself, well, how can I love the part of myself that, like, I don't know, wants to be mean to other people? Or how can I love the part of myself that's really inconsistent? Aren't we supposed to be stable and consistent for one another? How can I love the part of myself that's sometimes really self-centered? Uh-oh. How can I love the part of myself that's gosh, what else do we judge about ourselves? All kinds of sexual, my sexuality. I can't love her because America says be pure and be simple, unless you're, or be pure and be clean and that means spiritual, right? We've got all these judgments. Our judgments create separation internally. The point is, the answer to the question, how can I love these parts that are judged by our society, is by choice. You can choose to. And what happens is when you bring those parts back into full holistic integration with your entire self, your adult self, your whole self, when you allow yourself to be a cursing spiritualist, in my case, some people, I forget that people give a shit about that and they'll comment about it. And I'll be like, really? You're still thinking about that? But I forget how do I say, mired in judgment most people are, how deeply entrenched up to their necks and sometimes over their heads people live in the realm of this is good and this is bad. God doesn't give a fuck if you say fuck or not. Your parents gave a fuck. Now, I will say this. If you say fuck and it makes you feel separated from your sense of self, don't say fuck a lot. Don't do that. When I say fuck in times where it's appropriate for me, not just willy-nilly, but when I say it and it feels like the right word to say, that makes me feel more whole. Why? I'm a weird lady. But I don't need to judge that part of myself and therefore create separation internally. I need to love that part of myself and include her in my behavior, in my daily life, in my experience of having a self. That's if I want to be healed, whole, healthy, and sane, and not feel and be fragmented inside myself. So what does this have to do with human design and do you stay or do you go, which was the topic for today? It has everything to do with it. Human design is one of the most, my goodness, facile, practical, multidimensional tools for getting out of self-judgment that I've ever seen on this planet. And it's part of why I'm so obsessed with it. I'm also obsessed with it because it just continues, despite my mind and ego, to speak truth over and over and over and over and over and over again. So I find it's interesting because when I'm channeling for people in the Akashic records in my private healing sessions with people, the record keepers are starting to show me people's charts. Like, I will have never seen your chart in life, and it'll come through in my vision in the session. So when that started to happen, I was like, well, I can no longer deny or resist the power of what human design is. So I started to ask the divine or consciousness itself a lot of questions about, why are you showing me this person's chart? And the awareness I keep getting is that the design speaks to how the vehicle of the individual is meant to correctly function. And when the vehicle of the individual, your body, mind, organism, is correctly functioning for you, you are close to and feel close to spirit. You are close to and feel close to consciousness. You are one with the universe. It's like when athletes and CEOs and high functioning people talk about being in the flow. My current perspective is that the flow state is where we're so not in judgment of ourselves. We're so in honoring and in love with ourselves, as it were. We so honor and love ourselves that we are functioning correctly. The machine can function correctly when no parts of self are exiled. When the machine is functioning correctly, you're in flow. Like, think of it this way. If your body mind organism is you guys know the luge in the Olympics, the luge sport where you're on like a sled, but you're laying down and you're in a tunnel that's made of ice and you're just sliding down the ice tunnel. That's the luge. If you like buy I don't know what the thing is called that you lay on. If anybody knows what it's called, please put it in the chat. But like your little surfboard that you lay on when you're doing the luge, if you make it of the right materials and then you like lube it up with whatever kind of lube you put on your luge, your luge is going to slide down the tunnel very nicely, very easily. You're going to be in flow and you're going to win that race. Human design helps us understand how to lube our luge. Human design helps you understand, like, what is the oil that makes the engine of me function correctly? So when you see a lot of charts the way I do, I've been integrating human design into all my healing sessions with people lately, and I've seen a lot of charts, right? I'm looking at a lot of people's charts. The charts are so specific and so different from one another. You know, we used to have only like the tools of astrology. Let's say those of us who are woo-woo-ily inclined. And astrology is great and it's pretty specific, but boy, is it nowhere near as specific as human design. My point being, when you've seen enough human design charts and you see like how specifically oriented each human vehicle is, and when you see over and over again how different centers in the human vehicle are defined, meaning they function a consistent way. They are fixed and they are not changing. And then when you see the centers in a human being that are open, which means they are conditionable, programmable, and very free thinking, free feeling, free experiencing, not very reliable because they have no consistent way of functioning. But when you see like the specific makeup of how many open centers one person has versus defined centers, and you see that dozens of times in a day, client after client, and how different they are. And you start to watch the ways that within somebody's chart that has definition is unchangeable. You could do healing sessions until you're dead, and you will never change the parts of yourself that are fixed or defined. When you see that happen for people over and over again, and when you watch people start to embrace their definition and own what it is about them that is fixed, you start to see people come to life, and you start to see people's luge get lubed, and you start to watch people whoosh down the portal of the luge tube. Nobody knows what this is called. Nobody has written it in the chat. Nobody knows what this is called? Could someone tell me? You've got to know what this is called. I don't know what it's called. But that's when you start to see people functioning correctly for themselves. And when people are functioning correctly from themselves, there's no friction in their life, and they feel really unified with the fucking universe. You feel happy in your relative self. The relative self is the part that cares about feelings and needs and having a house and money and relationships and sex and food. And you feel unified with the absolute self, who is expanded and dissolved into the realms of infinity, oneness, no separation. That's what having a vehicle that functions correctly and that accepts itself as it is does. Now, how does this relate to staying versus going? Well, this is a topic I see a lot come up with my clients and with my students, which is that people really struggle with the idea of leaving. Leaving is a hard idea, and it's understandable relationally. Bobsled, says Sonia. It's not a bobsled, but it's close to that. Thank you for trying. I appreciate you, Sonia. So, we are so deeply conditioned in this reality to believe that truth, love, spirituality, consciousness means you stay together and you stay together forever. Now, I'm not saying stay together is bad or wrong. I'm saying that it's not necessarily right. Just because our culture says marriage and house and family and together doesn't mean that's correct for you at this time. It may be, but it may not be. And something that I find very important and very helpful is that is this idea. When you have a relationship with someone, friend, business, romance, whatever it might be, and you find that there is a kind of dynamic between the two of you that plays out over and over and over again. And no matter how much conscious attention you bring to that dynamic, and no matter how many I statement laden conversations you have, and no matter how much therapy the two of you do, and no matter how much you try to be empathetic towards the other person, and no matter how much you care about them and love them, that pattern continues to repeat and repeat and repeat. When that happens, chances are good you have what's called in your human design charts a mechanic or a space in your chart where the puzzle piece of you and the puzzle piece of them just does this. It doesn't fit. Now, there are several different kinds of difficult mechanics in the human design language for things. For example, one person can really dominate another person in a certain gate or channel. Another example is one person can actually compromise another person in gates and channels. You can have what are called electromagnetic gates with people. Electromagnetic, it's the wrong word, but you can have electromagnetic mechanics with people where you feel like all that chemistry that brings you together immediately. Those then turn into the exact same things that make you want to kill them and go the other way. So there are a lot of dynamics that are at play between people on the mechanical level. In other words, your auric field, so your aura expands about 15 feet around your body in every direction, up and down and left and right and forward and back. In the human design system, and I was about to talk to you guys about how I've rejected systems except this one, and I'm going to put a pin in that and come back to that in just a minute. The gates and channels and centers, be they open or defined, that you have in your human design chart represent different energies that are occurring in your auric field, whether you like it or not. Some of these energies that are occurring are conscious energies, and some are unconscious energies. So sometimes you have an energy coming off of you that other people will experience, and you'll be like, I didn't put that energy out there. And they'll be like, well, it's coming off you. They won't say it that way, maybe, but they'll say, like, an example in my life is people just always have wanted me. They always think I'm strong and a leader. And I don't always feel like a strong leader. I feel like a sensitive lady a lot. But people seem to believe words I say. And this is like a gift in my life. But it took me a lot of years to really embrace that gift because I don't have that consciously in my chart. I have it unconsciously. So I have definition in a part of my chart that makes me a really pretty effective leader and speaker for people. But I didn't really trust that because it was in what's called an unconscious channel. So once I started to study my chart and see, oh my God, look at that. I have the channel of speaks well in front of people. That's not what it's called, but that's the gist. And leads people and has things to say that help people, as long as the person, me, is being super authentic and totally myself. When I saw that that was there, but it was there unconsciously, that made me understand, oh, that's one of the energies that comes off of me that is just coming off of me, no matter whether I want it to or not. So the more we become aware of the energies we carry, the more we can take advantage of and use to everybody's highest good and benefit who we actually are and what we actually are. Another piece that makes this useful is understanding that these defined energies within your chart, they are not going anywhere. They will not change. You can spend your entire life trying to change them, trying to fix them, trying to heal them. And you know what that does? Going back to our initial conversation today, is that creates more and more separation inside yourself. The best healing advice I can give anyone is any part of yourself that you're in judgment of, make it your best friend. Get friendly and close to, integrated with all the shadow aspects of self that you have pushed away and made bad or wrong. Part of why you can trust that you can do this is that when the parts of self that have been exiled re-enter the whole system of the human being, when they are actually healthfully reintegrated, which I find happens really well when you integrate the spiritual work. In other words, I do parts work with people to help them reintegrate their exiled parts, but I do it using the spiritual energy as a tool to facilitate the integration happening more completely. When you integrate an exiled part using the divine light to integrate it back into the body, mind, spirit organism, usually what happens is that exiled part becomes the exalted version of itself. So what do I mean by that? Let's say you have a part of you that was a protector part that protected you when you were very young. And let's say that protector part is really aggressive. So there's a part of you that's really protective and aggressive. If you were to give that part of you voice and hear that part of you and sit with that part of you, and in my case, as I work with people, bring the light of the divine to that part of you, that part of you would get to express its truth, its angry, aggressive truth, so thoroughly and so fully that eventually what would happen is that part would reintegrate and grow up and meet you at your current age. And the qualities of aggression would then get transmuted into what they actually are in the realm of spirit, which in this case might be, for example, strength. So what was aggression when you exiled this part, when the part is welcomed back into the fold, that aggression becomes potency, power, energy, strength. It doesn't stay as a rageful bobcat of aggression in the corner. It transmutes into what it was meant to be all along. I'll give you another example. When you have a really scared part of self, excuse me, maybe you had a bunch of trauma when you were a kid, and there's a part of you that is just really intimidated by everything. If you sit with that intimidated part, that vulnerable part, and you feel her in your body, you don't think about it in an abstract way in your head. You literally find her, merge with her, feel into her, ask her what she wants to say, let her speak. She's going to grow up inside of you and turn into or transmute right there and then, by the way, right there in that one session, this can all happen, into maybe a kind of open-hearted sensitivity, a lovingness, a nurturing quality. So we don't know what the scared parts of self are going to turn into, and we don't know what the aggressive, angry, acting out parts of self are going to turn into when we reintegrate them. But when we reintegrate them, we find out. So all of this is to say, when you look at your human design chart, you don't have to be afraid of anything you discover there, because all the energies that are there, that are fixed and not going anywhere, when they are worked with in a way that brings holistic integration, wholeness for an individual, the quality that they each carry becomes the exalted version of that quality, the higher self version of that quality. So all you can do is benefit by understanding your chart more fully. All that happens is benefit, is positivity for you to understand, where am I fixed and where am I flexible? Now, coming back to the topic of leaving or staying, there are so many dynamics that happen between people where people think, if only that person would be like this or stop being like that, Or if only I could change myself to be like this or stop being like that, then I could stay together with this person. We might want to consider why togetherness is the hallmark for everything good. Why is togetherness lauded so highly? Now, the answer to that question is because it feels better, because being together is better than separation. Isolation is terrible for a human being. But you have to examine, we all have the opportunity to examine all the preconceived notions we have about separation in the form of a breakup or a splitting apart of a relationship. That is to say, if I have a mechanic with you, if you and I are friends, let's say we're work associates, and every single time we interact, you always bulldoze over me, and no matter how hard I try, I can't get my voice heard in our dynamic. I've tried being nice, I've tried being direct, I've tried talking to your boss, I've tried talking to my boss. Nothing I do changes it. It's like when we're in the same room together, you bulldoze and I'm small, and we just can't change it. In fact, I should use an actual example from my life. I'm thinking of a specific relationship I had back in California for many years. This friend of mine up in Northern California, I adore her. We're still dear friends. There came a day where I realized when I hang out with this person, they always have to be right. They're always right. There's nobody else is ever right but them. And for a long time, I was pushing back against it. I was like, no, I'm going to be right. I can also be right. I have a voice. I get to have a voice here. And one day I finally looked at our charts together and I realized, holy shit, this mechanic is in the charts. It's there. This woman is always going to need that. And I am always going to be compromised. It's called a compromise channel. She just compromises me in this one channel. In that particular case with that particular friend, I was able to say to myself, I'm never going to really have a voice in this friendship in the way that I do in most of my other friendships. But then I was able to ask myself a question. Is this relationship worth keeping, even though I don't have much of a voice here? Are there enough other things in this dynamic that I get from the relationship that make it okay for me to just be like when we hang out, I'm kind of like this. Oh, that's fun. Yep. And then she'll ask me one question about me and I'll be like, well, it was like this. And she'll be like, oh, wow. Anyway, back to me. Now, I also realized with this friend, she wasn't a narcissist. I know narcissism and I know it well. And boy, have I danced with that devil a fair amount. This particular friend is just compromises me in communication. That's all it is. In that case with her, I chose to stay friends with her because I dropped my expectation or my pushback, my resistance to her being the one who talks all the time. And I just said, I'm going to let her talk all the time. It's fine. Because our mechanic is what our mechanic is. Now, put me in a room with somebody else and I might be the talky one all the time. Because my communication, whatever, might compromise your communication, whatever. And I might be talky all day. And no matter how much I try to back off and listen more, I might not be able to with you, depending on what our auric fields are doing together. The big point I'm trying to make here is there are certain things that are just going to always be between people. And so what we have to look at is, rather than clinging desperately to staying together, we want to ask some more sophisticated, subtle, evolved questions about our togetherness. Am I getting enough out of this togetherness to make this dynamic worth it? Now, I'll give you another example. I've had other friendship dynamics where I was compromised and or dominated in ways that were so draining, so diminishing of my energy field, so exhausting, so frustrating. And I'm going to talk about that in a second, that I had to get out. I had a ton of love for the people and I had to get out. I didn't want to get out. And I had to get out because I looked at our charts together and I saw no matter what any of us does, this person is going to dominate and compromise me in these particular places that I personally cannot stand or tolerate. I'm not willing to. So what we have to get away from is this idea that anytime you can't tolerate something, that's something wrong with you and you need to do a big bunch of work to heal it or change it or fix it. Sometimes that's true. Sometimes it's not. And it all depends on the specific example, the specific relationship, and the specific dynamic that you're in the middle of. So when we have the benefit of looking at the chart, we can see in relationship to someone else's chart where we're being compromised, where we're doing some compromising, where we're being dominated, where we're doing some domination. And we could then start to make more conscious choices about staying together or coming apart. Now, coming back to this idea of systems, that I have never been a systems lady. I don't generally like systems. I have too much individual circuitry in my chart. Individual circuitry people tend to be very, don't tell me what to do-ish. Please hold. Also, just, on a purely philosophical, energetic level, I just can't abide by systems. See, what tends to happen is when you create a system and human beings are involved in the system, you have to create rules inside of the system to keep the system functioning and to keep the people who join the system knowing how to behave in that system. But the moment you create a rule about something, now you've got a black and whiteism created that doesn't have room for certain people to do what they need to do or want to do in the moment. So you're always going to have some people reacting and resisting to the system. Whereas I tend to be of the point of view of, like, if you can know yourself and know your own strategy and authority and how the machine of you operates best and most effectively, then you could just do that. You don't need a system to tell you how to be. You don't need somebody else's rules and dogma to dictate or decide for you what's true for you. Now, some people operate really well inside of systems because they have more tribal circuitry or collective circuitry, which is where you might be someone who's really got their mental orientation or their energetic awareness is really focused on the tribe or focused on the collective. I don't happen to be that type. I happen to be pretty individual, but you might be that type. And in that case, you might do really well inside of systems because you might find, like, hey, you got to break some eggs to make an omelet. And it's okay that I don't like all the rules. And the greater benefit is more important than paying attention to the nitpicky details of each individual rule. And I don't mind that much. Excuse me. To which I say, rock on. Because I'm not in judgment of you or me. I'm doing my best to live this life in a way that says, I'm okay, you're okay, for real. And let's explore the details of that so we both can understand ourselves more intimately and be more free. Okay, so then if I'm so anti-systems, how can I be so into this human design system? Well, because it's a system that teaches you who you are, the individual. It's not a system that says, do what I say. It's a system that says, here's some words to describe you, and here's some tools that tend to work for people who have the qualities you have. Now, and go play with it all. See what works for you. See what works best. It doesn't say, here's the dogma, follow the dogma. Now, let's be real. Every time there's a system, including human design, you're going to get people who follow the system in a rulesy, religious-y, dogmatic way. That's what people do. They come into systems and they go, there's a right way to do the system and there's a wrong way to do the system, and you got to do it the right way or you're blah, 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 fuckity fuck. I'm not a fan of that. I'm a fan of helping people liberate themselves from their own chains, from the chains of their own making. So, in short, how do we know when to stay or when to go? The first thing you want to look at is, what do I believe will happen if I go? Have you decided that you'll be alone forever? Have you decided that if this person can't understand you or connect with you and all your idiosyncrasies, that nobody will? Have you decided that if you leave, you're a bad person? Have you decided that if you leave, you're not spiritual? Have you decided that if you leave, you're a failure at relationship? What have you decided separating means? And would you be willing to examine those beliefs and ask yourself if they're really actually the truth? Or are they coming from conditioning and programming from our culture? Number two, you might want to look at your chart in relationship to their chart and start to understand, where am I compromised here? Where am I compromising? Where am I dominating? Where am I dominated? And get some information and gain some insight and awareness around those details so that you can make an informed, aware choice. You can then ask yourself, am I willing to be, is it okay for me to be compromised in these ways because I'm getting all this other stuff? Or is being compromised in these two ways just too much on me? And that brings us back to judgment of self. When you know that something is not working for you, a relationship, a job, a meal, whatever it is, and you want to stop, but you can't stop because you believe a judgy thing about yourself because of it, that's where you need to do some real reintegration of some exiled parts work. You need to find out, when did I first decide this limiting belief? When did I first decide to believe that if I leave, I'll be alone forever? If I leave, it means I'm not kind. If I leave, it means I'm mean and self-centered is bad. When did all of that start? And then you need to sit with that part and allow it to reintegrate so that it is no longer exiled, so that it can take its exalted form within your psyche and you can be whole. But I want to be really clear with you guys right now and really transparent and say, I want to acknowledge how hard it is. Parts work sessions are not the hardest thing. Energy work healing is not the hardest thing. Getting your human design chart is not the hardest thing. You know what the hardest thing is? Not judging yourself. Additionally, the second hardest thing, or another thing that's very hard, is understanding when something needs to be changed or adjusted or grown with, and when something really just is what it is and it's not going anywhere. If I could give one thing to humanity that I think would change the entire landscape of every single thing in the history of time, that would be learning. I would give everyone the power to know what they need not judge in themselves. And then I would give everyone the power to know how to work with their parts, the parts they've been in judgment of for so long. The answer to what parts of you do you need to not judge is all of them. There's no part of you that benefits from you judging it. There may be parts of you that benefit from you helping those parts grow, but growth never is easy in a field of judgment. If you water flowers in a flower bed with battery acid, that's the equivalent of pouring judgment on top of the parts of you that are injured and behaving badly. The only way to change a part is to love it back into wholeness. And what's the first step of loving a part? You've got to acknowledge it exists. What's the second part? You've got to sit with it and ask it what it needs to say, do, or feel. And you've got to hold space for that to occur. So lots to examine when we're looking at staying or going, and lots to understand around what judgment really is. Anytime you create separation between you and a part of you, you're in judgment of you. And when you're in judgment of you, you're not whole. And when you're not whole, you're miserable, usually, or at least a little bit miserable, because you've got a split inside. And splits feel really bad. They feel really empty. They feel really toxic. Last thing I want to say, and then I want to take any questions anyone might have, is I want to talk about the word healing for a second, because oftentimes we think healing means I can change all these parts of myself to be some other way. It's not true. Healing is the reintegration of all the exiled parts. Healing is becoming whole. Healing is functioning correctly as the vehicle of you. Healing is becoming you, not becoming your teacher, not becoming your priest, not becoming the guy at the front of the room or the lady at the front of the room. You're not here to become like me. You're here to hear the words I say so that they activate something in you so you become like you. And I hope you get some energy healing work if you want it. And I hope you have your human design chart looked at if you want to. because I find those to be empowering tools. But maybe you don't. Maybe you have a whole other system of tools that you use, in which case I say, cheers, bitch. Use whatever tools work for you. Just get back to wholeness and get back to, or get out of judgment of self. And I'll say this too. You know what the best way to never ever get out of judgment is to judge yourself for judging you. Because that's what happens first. As soon as I say to you, like, are you in judgment of that exiled part? You go, oh my God, I'm such a piece of shit. I can't believe I judged that exiled part. Now you're in judgment of yourself for judging that part. Now you have two problems. So the task is to practice loving the parts of self that have been exiled. And don't worry if you don't know what that feels like. All you have to do is pay attention to it, that part, let it have a voice, let it have its feelings, and let it reintegrate into you. I find that something that helps with reintegration is divine light. When divine light is part of the equation and the process of reintegration, it works better. All right, I have talked a lot. I'd like to hear if anybody has any questions. They can be super specific to you or they can be more general. Please throw your questions in the comment bar here. And if I don't have an answer myself, I will endeavor to open the Akashic Records and get some guidance from Spirit itself. Please don't be shy. Remember, when you type your questions in the chat, you're contributing to the whole group because there's always somebody who benefits from your question. So throw it in there, folks. I'm going to hydrate. Hydration. Yeah, this cough has really lingered with me since COVID, but as some of my friends that are here now know, I've had the cough before COVID. And I believe it's really just embarrassing amounts of, my body doesn't like espresso and I need to stop drinking it. And I'm having heartburn in the form of a cough, but I'm too stubborn. I'm not ready. I'm in resistance to letting go of espresso, deep resistance for years. All right. What questions do folks have? Okay. Sonia says, I find myself judging my weight, even unconsciously. Yeah. I get it. My pleasure, Mariana. Thank you. Well, there's a bunch of parts work I could suggest for you, Sonia, in terms of judging the weight. And I'm glad you're saying that because I've heard you talk about your weight a fair amount over the years. And I really get it. I relate. What female in America, and a lot of men too, don't judge themselves for their weight? It's so common. It's maybe the most common judgment there is. I myself lately have been asking my body very directly, in the records, out of the records, talking to consciousness, talking to myself, do you want to lose weight? And I get a no even as I say it right now. My body doesn't want to drop the 10 pounds I think it needs to drop. It doesn't want to. It likes this weight a lot. And so my practice is to sit with the parts of self that believe they are only lovable, Sonia, if they are thinner. So I would give you the homework of what parts of self, how old were you when you first bought the idea that if you were just thinner, mom would love you more or dad would treat you better or something. And I want to tell you, this thing with weight is so deeply shoved into the back of the brainstem for most people that it can be very difficult to find the younger part of self that first bought into the lie that if I were thinner, I would be lovable, or if I were thinner, blank would happen. Who knows what it is? But you can do it. It is doable. So I would ask myself, frankly, I would like to do a parts work session with you is what I'd like to do. But we want to work with those parts that believe they are unlovable unless they're thin. And you want to love those parts by paying attention to them, giving them voice, and reintegrating them back into your current age and self so that you can be in less judgment of your body, no matter what it's doing. And I am in a process of that myself. There are many little fragmented parts that are in judgment of this body. And I've really been in a process with that myself. It's very powerful and it's working. I can say that much. So I hope that's helpful. That's what I know about that. All right, let's see. What beginner's book do you recommend for human design? I have my chart, can't read it. Yeah, what they suggest, Deirdre, with human design is get a foundation reading. Whether you get it from me or somebody else doesn't matter, but get a foundation reading from someone you trust. Like somebody needs to show you how human design works. It's a little too complicated to just pick up a book. That being said, once you've had a foundation reading, or if you choose not to get a foundation reading, it's your choice, obviously. There is a book, I don't have it in this room, but it's called Human Design, and it's a red book, and it's got the Rave mandala on it. It's got a chart on the front, and it's just called Human Design. It's kind of the Bible of human design. If anybody has it at home right now, I don't know if Richard is still here. I know he has the book. If you're able to throw the picture of it in the chat, I don't know if that's possible here, but I would just search for the book called Human Design by Ra Uru Hu, and I'll write that in the chat here. His name is Ra Uru Hu, and if you guys want if you want to see the most entertaining, wacky, wild story you've ever seen, go to YouTube and search Ra Uru Hu's Encounter with the Voice. It's the story of how he channeled human design, and it's wacky. And it's one of my favorite stories of all time. My pleasure, Deirdre. I hope that's helpful. But truly, they do suggest in human design, get your chart read by somebody who could give you some basics, because there's so much to it. And then once you have the basics down, they'll give you homework to go off and study or play with or ask questions about, and then, dive into that book if you like. All right. Jill says, no question mark, but very timely for me. I'm in the middle of a divorce after 30 years together, re-meeting me as an adult self when I left as a 20-year-old. Wow. Re-meeting me. Oh, I see. As an adult when I left as a well, good for you. Rock on, Jill. I'm very happy for you. Yeah, I mean, man, divorce is so for real. Now, that brings up a really good point, which is I don't want anyone hearing this to think I mean to minimize the pain of separating from people or minimize the pain of divorce. I haven't even been married in my life, but I've been in some deep romantic relationships that I've had to end that have been devastating, very, very devastating to end. But what I can say, okay, inside the devastation of a breakup or the end of a marriage or the end of any kind of relationship, the way that you get triggered by the breakup and the separation tells you a lot about the parts of self that need reintegration. The way you get triggered and the way you get miserable shows you where your work is. In other words, I'll give you an example. I discovered at a certain point that any breakup I go through with people used to bring up for me a feeling of I am a bad person. I am like a toxic, shame-laden bad person. Mostly because my breakups tend to come at my own hand. I tend to be the breaker-upper. That was not always true. In my 20s and early 30s, I was getting dumped left and right, and I couldn't figure it out until I figured it out. In other words, I worked with what that dynamic was and got to the bottom of it, and it stopped happening. And then what started happening was I started to get with people who weren't quite right for me, and then I had to leave. And that's the current pattern I'm working through now, which is like, so my point is though, when I saw that consistently during each breakup afterwards, I was feeling like a bad person, like a miserable, bad, toxic, shame-laden person. I realized that shame and that bad person is an imprint energy that I was carrying. I was believing that unconsciously about myself, and the breakup was mirroring it to me. When we don't have negative imprints in our psychology and our nervous system, and you break up with someone, you feel relieved and you move along. And you love them and you grieve some and you're sad and then you kind of get over it. But if you're feeling like a bad, toxic, shame-laden asshole just for like taking care of yourself, something's going on there that's about you, Katie Rubin. And so I was able to really start to work with my shame and work with where did I get the idea that I was this terrible person for taking care of myself? And I could tell you where, because I've done my work on it and started very, very young. And then it got replicated and replicated and replicated in my childhood. So I've had a fair amount of work to do on that topic. So if any of you can relate to that, please know you're not alone. And this is a common thing. And breakup energy is a great place to see, what do you believe about yourself on the unconscious level that only comes up through a breakup? What do you believe about reality that only comes up via a breakup? It's a really, really powerful place to look. And Jill says, thank you. Very interesting to look at the areas that trigger me within the divorce as places to do my own work. Absolutely. Great insight. Very helpful. My pleasure. Happy to help you. Does anyone else have any questions, thoughts, curiosities, insights, any clarification points you could use? Please throw them in the chat. We have a couple minutes left. I don't know if Leslie is still here. She looks like she's not, but I may end a minute or two early because I'm leading oh, there she is. Hi. I'm leading a workshop tonight. By the way, if you're in Beacon, New York, come on down to Miss Tea. It's a tea shop on Main Street in Beacon, New York at 6:30 p.m. tonight. I'll be leading an Akashic Records healing circle. You can join us there. At my dear friend Moore has a tea shop. It's an incredible, by the way, tea shop, gorgeous tea shop. Go to Miss T anyway, because it's fucking great. Any other questions, curiosities people have about human design, leaving or staying, honoring the self, judgment, spirituality, Akashic Records? I'm here. Now's your moment. I'm going to hydrate. I know that this system has like a little bit of a delay. Like when people type, it takes a second for it to come through. So I'm tempted to wrap it up, but I'm always like, somebody might be typing. All right, cool, my friends. It's been a delight to be with you. I'm going to go ahead and throw katierubin.com up in the old chitty chat there. Get your chart read, book a sesh, do some healing work together. Come to a class, whatever you need. And we will be here next week at 5:30 normal time, Eastern Standard Time. 5:30 Wednesdays is when Katie Church will happen regularly. Thank you guys so much for being here. It's a delight to be with you. I hope this was helpful in some way. And have a great night. Bye.